survive well apart. We need a home now, as quickly as we possibly can.
Today's story is a very tragic story, and its events changed the law in England. The shocking thing is that it's the story of a little girl, so before we start the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Our story begins with the Payne family, Sarah and Mike, a married couple living with their children in a county called Surrey in England. They had 4 children, and each child had a distinct personality. It starts with the eldest child, whose name was Lee, who was 13 years old. Then came Luke, who was 11 years old. Then came Sarah, who was 8 years old, and her name was inspired by her mother's name. The youngest daughter, whose name was Charlotte, was 6 years old. Her mother worked in a nightclub that made drinks. Sarah and Charlotte were always taken with her. At the end of the week, the couple decided to spend the weekend at their grandparents' house. It was a house in Sussex. What excited the children the most was that their grandfather's house overlooked the beach. Today was Saturday, the 1st of July. As soon as they arrived, everyone gathered at the dining table. After eating, they decided to go to the beach. After playing, one of their grandfather's friends finished building her new house, so they decided to go. However, this was considered boring for the children, so the children began to beg their mother to. They left them on the beach and said that they would not go far. Then the mother was convinced. At first, she refused, but then she was relieved because the beach was full of families and it was noon, meaning the situation was very safe. Then the mother agreed, but on one condition. She said to me, "Their big brother, whose name is Lee, your brothers are all your responsibility, so take care of your brothers." So I agreed and promised him that everything would be fine. Then the mother, father, grandfather and grandmother went and everything was fine. The children were playing. Then they decided to play hide and seek, but the whole beach was exposed. So they decided to play in the cornfield behind the grandfather and grandmother's house. There, they could hide behind the tall plants, and the situation would be very fun. They actually went to the cornfield. After they were playing and having fun, Sarah fell to her knees and started crying loudly. She decided to go back home. Then she told me, "Let's go to the house of the rest of her brothers. Come back to me by yourself. We want to play." Then, without him noticing, Sarah walked away from them, remembering Lee's responsibility, so he ran after her, and while he was running, he turned around to check on Luke and Charlotte because they were also responsible, and after checking on them, he continued walking behind Sarah. Lee was only a few seconds away from her and he could see her clearly in front of her until he turned between the trees and continued until he reached a turn. But after that Sarah disappeared and Lee kept looking between the trees, but he didn't find her, so he thought that she preceded him, so he continued on his way until he reached the house. As soon as he entered the house, he saw his grandfather and grandmother. He asked them, "Did you see Sarah?" They replied, surprised, and said, "No, we have just entered a house." Lee was afraid. After 2 minutes, the mother and father arrived. Lee told me that Sarah had disappeared. His tension began to increase, so the family went out to look for Sarah, but there was no trace of her. They expanded the scope of the search and went out in their cars, but there was no trace. The mother was very afraid, and it is known that mothers know the personalities of their children. They know that Sarah is a very shy girl. After that, they started asking people, "Did you see a girl with long hair, blonde and shy?" Everyone said no, and people also started looking for Sarah but without any result, so they decided to call the police. Police began searching the local area, which quickly became a nationwide search and a national news story, with members of the. During the search and investigation, Lee remembered a piece of information that completely changed the course of the search. He said that when he followed his sister in the cornfield, he saw an old man with frightening features and long hair with a little gray, riding a white truck. He looked at him for several seconds, then quickly left the field. Sarah Payne's family from the search operations social media. After this information, the police focused their search on people with criminal records, whether in kidnapping, murder, or rape, in the area where Sarah disappeared, provided that they had a white truck. A large number of people with criminal records were actually investigated, including a man in his 40s who lives near the grandparents' house, who had previously been tried in a case of raping an 8-year-old girl. After 48 hours of investigation, he was released due to lack of evidence, especially since he did not own a white truck. After several days, and the news of Sarah's disappearance spread, the media focused on the case, which became a public opinion issue, so the police search became more intensive, relying on other search methods, such as searching rivers, and relying on helicopters to scan the entire area, in addition to citizens going out themselves and organizing special search campaigns. During that period, several calls were received from unknown persons to the family to inform them that they had seen Sarah, but all of those calls were false. After 16 days of searching, Sarah's father received a decisive call from a farmer who lives in the same area that the disappearance incident occurred. He said that he was working in his field as always, and during that time he found a hole with a little girl completely naked and buried inside it. When the police arrived and recovered the body, it turned out that it was indeed Sarah. Sarah's body was decomposed, completely stripped of her clothes, and she had bruises covering a large part of her body. After the autopsy, it turned out that she had been subjected to violence and brutal torture before being killed by strangulation. Due to the degree of decomposition of the body, it was not confirmed whether she had been raped or not. On the third day after Sarah Payne's body was found, while the police were still searching for the suspect in the case, they received a call from a woman who said that she had found a shoe of a little girl, which she suspected belonged to Sarah. The mother recognized her daughter's shoe, so the police analyzed it, and they found that it contained fibers from the clothes of the same 40-year-old man who had been previously investigated. His name is Roy Whiten, and he had previously been imprisoned on charges of raping a minor. It turned out that this same person was in prison on charges of theft, and was sentenced to a prison sentence of 22 months. During the investigation, it turned out that this person had a white truck, inside which were found wires formed to tie hands, ropes, knives, baby oil, and sweets. After analyzing the tissues inside the truck, it was confirmed that Sarah was indeed inside it, which confirmed that the killer was in the hands of the police, and he was sentenced in November 2001 to life imprisonment. The Sarah Law for the Protection of Minors. In 1995, Roy Whiten was tried in prison on charges of raping a minor, and because he confessed to the crime, he was sentenced to only 4 years in prison, a sentence that was rejected by the psychiatrist who supervised his case, who said that this type of person has a high potential to commit the same crime again. After only 2.5 years, Roy was released to participate in rehabilitation sessions. The horrific story of Sarah's death at the hands of one of her father's family's neighbors, Roy Whiten, made the judiciary in England decide to issue a new law bearing her name, in order to protect children and minors from kidnapping, murder and rape. This law stipulates the right of parents to obtain the criminal record of all neighbors in the area they want to move and live in, and to ensure that the place is safe to live with their children. And here we have reached the end of the story. Don't forget to write your opinion about the story and whether it deserves this judgment. Personally, the judgment should be more strict because Sarah is a little girl. What is her fault?
And we don't survive well apart. We need a home now, today, quickly as we possibly can.
If you're reading this, please come home, and we miss you, and we want you back. We will find you no matter what it takes, and we have a big surprise for you when you come home.
I hope you liked it. Don't forget to like and subscribe.